listening to the Esq.Marketing podcast, hosted by Matthew Lauren, president of Esq.Marketing, where he features successful solo and SMB law firms from all over the United States. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey, I'm Matthew Lauren, and you're listening to the Esq.Marketing podcast, where I feature successful entrepreneurs in the legal industry. This episode is brought to you by our sister publication, the Rankings podcast, with host Chris Dreyer. And speaking of successful entrepreneurs, today I have the pleasure of speaking with Jocelyn Brumbaugh. Jocelyn is the founder of Builden Partners, a legal marketing company that helps law firms turn their random acts of marketing into forward-looking strategies that will both strengthen their firm's brand and keep them top of mind with their clients and prospects. Jocelyn and her team at Builden work exclusively with law firms, from project work for AM Law 100 firms to serving as an outsourced marketing department for mid-sized firms. She is also the founder and executive director of the Legal and Professional Services Council, a 500-member nonprofit organization focused on best practices in business development and marketing at professional services firms. Whew. Jocelyn, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Matthew. Great to be here.
Let's jump right in here. Tell me more about Builden Partners. What do you guys do?
So we do marketing strategy for law firms exclusively. The senior team and I all grew up at some of the largest law firms in the world. And so we really have a handle on how to raise profile in a way that allows the lawyers to focus on what they want to focus on. We're a little bit different than other consultants in our space because we tell the lawyers that they don't have to sell more or speak more or write more in order to raise their profile. They just need to fully leverage the good work that they already do.
So what are some common mistakes you see law firms making when it comes to their marketing?
So, this random acts of marketing is real. Lawyers need to understand that marketing is a process, and it is very process driven, and that they need to do a handful of things consistently, even when they're busy. And so, we have a 5-step model that we'll go into in a couple minutes. And the mistakes I see them making a lot of times is they will, for example, take some news about some good work that they've done or an award or something in the community that they've done, and they put it on their website and they say, I've marketed. And they think like they're done for the day. And that's a real problem because they're doing great work, but not always taking the steps to get it in front of their clients and prospects. And just putting it on your website does not do that.
Where else would they leverage something like that? I'm curious. So yeah, I see that too, them putting, they win a big case or they do something helpful in the community and they put it on the blog and maybe that's it. But where else could they leverage that kind of stuff? So
that's a great segue into this 5-step model that we do because it really is not just about putting it somewhere. There's a process that they need to go through. And I can tell you a little bit about like how this process came about. I grew up in large law firms. I was at Foley & Lardner for many years. I started up their PR department. And then I moved over to Baker McKenzie and was in global communications there. And so, I love law firms. I love law firm marketing. I started a nonprofit for people who do what we do, a trade group that meets really regularly and talks about best practices. But it wasn't until I jumped over to financial services. I spent a little bit of time at Citadel, which is a big hedge fund here in Chicago. And that really blew my mind. The focus on process, the focus on innovation, that's just not where law firms were at that time when I was growing up there. And I looked back at my life and, when I was at Baker McKenzie, I was opening up an office somewhere around the world about every other month. And every other month we started from scratch. And every other month, we were chickens with our heads cut off because there was no process. We didn't write it down. We didn't debrief and say, what can we do better next time? So this was the brainchild that I had when I was at Citadel saying, let's apply this process-driven approach of a financial services firm to law firm marketing because there was so much randomness and not this sense of there are these steps that you need to take every single time and do them consistently. And that's what's going to raise profile. So that really leads into this 5 steps, this 5 steps that we call the Builden Marketing Infrastructure Model.
And can you speak more specifically to what those steps are?
Of course, of course. Okay, so the first step is about mining what your firm is already doing well. So this goes back to what I'm saying that, for firms, the firms that really are in our sweet spot are firms with like 10 to 100 attorneys. Firms work really well with these 5 steps that we're going to talk about. And we have larger clients, we have smaller clients, but I find that it works really well in this space. And so when you mine for what you're already doing well, this is looking at the things that are already going on in your firm. You're already speaking, you're already winning, you already are being named to these many, many awards that we have here in the legal industry, right? You're on boards, there's webinars, there's new hires, there's people being named partners. There's a lot of things that are going on at the firm that you might not realize are news, and you're not using them as client touch points. So part of this first step is to gather all the things that are currently going on with the firm. But then there's a really important point that you need to think about, and that's how you position this, because this is another way that I find that smaller firms sometimes miss the mark. They'll position the news as administrative instead of as thought leadership. So here's an example. So let's say that I spoke recently at the Chicago Bar Association. If I made the headline, Jocelyn Brumbaugh spoke at the Chicago Bar Association, there is one person out there who would be interested in this headline, and that is my mom. But if we change the headline to say, Jocelyn Brumbaugh shared insights on how COVID is affecting jury trial selection, that's the same speech. That's the same speech that I agreed to a really long time ago because I forgot how long it was going to take to put the deck together, and oh my gosh, it's tomorrow. It's the same speech, but we're capturing the thought leadership of it. So that's a headline, that fake headline I just gave you, that's a headline that's going to grab the attention of way more people than just my dear mother. So that's step one. So there's a lot packed into just step one, and we've got 5 more to go.
Yeah. Right. And so mining existing assets. So they're taking things that they've done, and I heard a lot about repurposing content in there. That sounds like it's a really important part of that step.
It is, and when you have something like an event, you can mine that to take 3 bites of the apple. So before the event, say, hey, Matthew's speaking at this, here's how you register, like drumming up some interest in it. At the event, back in the days when we would have events in person, take a photo of you and your other panelists, or maybe even that, the Brady Bunch Zoom image that we're all so familiar with, and post that. So that's to show sort of the scale of how many people were there. And then afterwards, you capture the thought leadership, right? In my example, how COVID is affecting jury trials. That's 3 posts of the same speech. That's it, right? That's fully leveraging all the things that you're doing.
That's brilliant. And so you mine that content, or you mine the things that you're already doing, and you repurpose that for your marketing. What's step 2?
Okay. So step 2 is putting the news on your website, right? We talked about that. And so there's still many more steps, but that one is the one that you need to take, because that's going to be the foundation. And there's a couple things to keep in mind about putting the news on the website. One mistake that I see a lot of smaller firms have is they do have a news section on their website, but it's a long scroll of news.
Yes.
They need to make sure that it's in a blog type format where you have excerpts and then you go to a detail page, because when you're going to post this on social media, spoiler alert, those are future steps, you need that detail page that's going to take them directly to that news, that piece of news. The other things to keep in mind about posting the news on your website is that it's pretty well known that visitors to law firm websites go to a handful of places. Those places are the homepage, attorney bios, and the contact us page, because they're looking for your phone number. So put the news those places where people are going to be. And so this, Matthew, right? There's ways that you can dynamically tag content, right? That's exactly what we want, because we don't know, no lawyer is going to update their bio every time they do something good, right? They never look at it again. So if you have, you need to make sure that your website has the ability to dynamically link content to attorney bios, so they're constantly refreshing with the most current news.
Those are great tips, and especially with the how you say snippets that link to full detail pages of blog posts. I've seen sites like that where they're not doing that, and it's just one endless long scroll, and people sort of get anxiety when they see that, and they don't usually read all that. But it's interesting too how you say they only go to the homepage, the bios, and the contact page. I never really I've heard that before. Have you guys have your own data on that type of thing?
We don't. I borrow other people's data.
Okay. Cool. And so step 3, what happens after they put it on their blog, put it on their website?
Okay, so then you need to put the news on the firm LinkedIn page, and you need to have a firm LinkedIn page. And I do see that a lot of smaller firms don't put this part in. They don't create a firm LinkedIn page, and that's really problematic because a lot of small firm attorneys, they came from larger firms. So you come from a firm that has a very stylized logo when you look at your LinkedIn profile, and then you see this firm that was the spinoff. And on LinkedIn, all you have is that sad gray box. And sad gray box is what happens when you have your that piece of your experience that's not tied to a company page. And there's nothing that your associates can do about that. They can't go make their LinkedIn profile look better until you create a firm LinkedIn page. And it's that firm LinkedIn page where you need to be posting the content. That's where the content should go first. And there's a couple things to keep in mind when you post content there. We as humans love faces. Like that's really what we're drawn to, posts with pictures of people in them, or possibly cats, but that's not appropriate for this particular one. So just having a link, a post on LinkedIn that's text only, nobody's going to read it. So don't even bother. So make sure that you have an appropriately sized image. And the problem with LinkedIn is that LinkedIn images are horizontal. And no matter how much weight you've gained over COVID, you're still a vertical creature. And so if you just take your photo and you put it in that spot, it's going to be eyebrows, right? And you've seen it. You've seen LinkedIn posts that are just people's eyebrows. And that's because they're not taking this properly sized image. And again, it looks like no one's minding the store. These are these little things that you need to have in order to, this is step 3, right? We're halfway there. It's something that you need to do consistently. And something else I should say about this, these are not 5 tips. Like, please do not think of these are 5 tips. These are 5 steps that you have to take every time. And having these little details like the firm LinkedIn page, so you have that stylized logo, a properly sized image of the people who this news is about. Those are the key elements of step 3.
I like how you pointed that out about they're not 5 tips. Like you can sort of summarize it, right? But there is even, and I know this, but a lot of people might not understand that saying share it to your company LinkedIn page, there's so many moving parts to that and to doing it effectively. Like you said, the eyebrows, like I see all the time, it's almost like an afterthought. Someone just shares a link and whatever gets generated in the post, metadata is what shows up. And they don't give any thought to, engaging or mentioning other people in the post or using hashtags or using emojis or using properly sized images like you mentioned. So yeah, it's super important, and there's a lot of detail to all of that. And so after they publish it to LinkedIn, I had one side question. Is there any other social media they should be focused on?
So this depends on the kind of firm you are. We primarily handle B2B law firms. We do have we work a little bit in the family law space. So in the family law space, definitely Facebook is a place where you should also have this. If you're an insurance defense firm or, a firm, corporate firm, a litigation boutique, LinkedIn is the place that you should spend the most time. We do certainly have firms that are active on Twitter, that are active on Instagram. But if we're talking about the basic table stakes, LinkedIn is where you need to be.
Totally agree. And so after step 3, where do they go from there?
All right. So shocker, step 4 comes next. So step 4 is circulating the LinkedIn post internally. And here, this is the money step. This is where it all comes together. And this is going to be the most appropriate for firms that have a handful of people. And it works really well, as I was saying, in that size model that we've got, this 10 to 100. But here's what this means. So you take that LinkedIn post and you send it around internally and you say, congratulations to Jocelyn. She spoke last week and shared these tips. Here's a link to it on LinkedIn. Please go and like and share and comment as you see fit. And here's what that does. So internal communications is a giant afterthought at law firms. And especially right now when so many people are working from home. But when you've got firms of a certain scale and you send something around internally, then all of a sudden, if it's about corporate, then the litigation folks know what's going on. And the litigation folks the corporate folks will see the wins that it'll be this sort of water cooler that we don't always have, even in, pre-2019 times, to help be that glue to make sure that the different departments within the firms, the folks who don't always work on the same projects at the same time, to make sure they know what's going on. The second part that it does is it helps with retention, because your associates and your younger partners, they want to work somewhere where they're winning and where they're thought leaders in the community and where they're respected and they win awards. And they do work there, you just never tell them that. And all of their friends who are at other firms, they're doing cool things, and their friends who are associates get to like and comment and share on that stuff. But if you never give them that opportunity, they're not able to feel that same way and feel that connection to their firm. They want to be proud and share the cool stuff, but you have to give them the mechanism to do that.
That's really cool. I never really thought about it that way, that they actually want to be involved. They want to help out. And then that's also another example I just realized of leveraging the firm's existing assets. So their internal employees have connections in LinkedIn, and that maybe the company page doesn't have, or maybe the executives in the firm don't have, and they can leverage that by having people participate in social media.
Yes. So, that's another benefit of this step. The tens of thousands of collective connections that your folks have, you're getting it in front of these people. And we're all trying to hack LinkedIn's algorithm, right? Get as many likes as you can, so it moves out of your own firm's echo chamber and starts getting you in front of those other people. You can't do that on your own. You need to harness the attorneys and the staff in your firm to help get it to that critical point where it gets in front of more people than the people that you're already seeing all the time.
All right, final step. What is it?
No. The best part of step 4 is...
Oh, sorry. I rushed you.
That's okay. Step 4 is packed. Is this competition lever. And here's what this means. So if I send something around, Jocelyn, congratulations, she spoke last week at the CBA. If I send that around, all of a sudden Fred is going to be like, Jocelyn, she's an idiot. What about this thing that I did last week? Why don't you talk about that? And we can. We just didn't know that you were doing that because you didn't make it part of this infrastructure. So what this does is it makes attorneys mad. They say, how come everybody else is getting all this infrastructure? Why are you promoting their posts? Why can't you do it with me? We would be delighted to do it for you. We just didn't know about it. So it creates this virtuous cycle where you always have more news coming, because every time you send that around, you're poking people saying, other people are doing stuff. What about you? Are you doing stuff? And that is how you get a continuous stream of news.
That's cool how you turn that into a positive too. Like do people reach out to you often? Like, hey, why are you promoting them? I mean, what about us?
All the time. And when we talk about our model to managing partners, they shake their head and they say internal communications doesn't matter. And every single client comes back to us and says, this works.
I've heard that from people before too, in other industries where they frown on social media, and I'm like, I don't know. There's people that are using it really successfully, and if you can turn your employees into brand champions, why not?
100%.
And then so that's all of step 4, right?
Yes. We are safe to move on to step 5.
So step 5.
So step 5 is distributing a curated newsletter. So all of that content that you have had, all these wins and thought leaderships and new hires, when you have a certain amount of content, you take that same content and you push it out through an email marketing tool, like a Constant Contact or Active Campaign, those sorts of things. Same content, right? Because we're continuously leveraging that one thing that we talked about. And so this is that last step in leveraging that. And so you might have missed some people, the friends and family of the firm, prospects that you have on your list. And so you want to make sure to take a collection of news and get it in front of them too. Now, you don't want just a text-heavy newsletter, but hey, you have these social images that you already put on LinkedIn. So you can sprinkle those within your newsletter so it looks more visually engaging, and get it into the inboxes of the clients and prospects that you're trying to have a touch point for. A couple of things to keep in mind about this newsletter. The worst possible newsletter subject line is spring 2021. Your clients and prospects are not relying on you to find out that we are in a new quarter. So do not do that. The point that goes back to that first step when we tried to focus on the thought leadership, not the administrative part of it. The fact that it's Q2 is administrative. If you take your best headline and make that your subject line, you're going to get a lot more opens. Same with people who say, oh, this is, my firm newsletter number 73. I'm going to pull my hair out. No one cares. But Matthew, you've seen it. This is not a fake thing that I'm talking about. Take that subject line and make it your most interesting news item from this particular issue. And you only put a newsletter out when you have some content that's going to appeal to the litigators and the corporate folks and show some diversity and, checks the other boxes that are important to you. Not because you have 5 pieces of content, not because it's May and not April anymore. It's that reason.
I have seen subject lines like that before, and there's a very literal feel to it, like 5 pieces of content for April. That's the subject.
Yep.
Oh, that's hilarious. So I had another question that came up during our conversation. People are bombarded by messaging from endless amounts of channels. How can law firms stand out in the spaces that they're in?
So a lot of the things that we talked about that are in this model will do that. It's about putting your thought leadership first. It's about getting the content to people when they need it. So that's timely. That you see whenever there's like some sort of Department of Labor guidance update, right? You get a ton of emails. You have to be quick. So that's a key part of it. But you don't have to have everything in the communication. It's okay to say, here's a couple of tips about this new guideline or whatever it is that came down, this new precedent that was set, and then have a follow-up or hold a webinar about it. But being fast is important, and really thinking hard about the content that is going to make people care. Is it that if you don't follow this, you're going to lose employees or they might sue you? Like, what is the action that you want your clients to take? And put that in the subject line. Because even if you just say, new DOL guidance, they don't know why they have to care. You have to help them understand the why and make that front and center.
Do you work with law firms that have a smaller amount of employees? How does this model fit in there?
So, a lot of times we come in and we'll build the marketing infrastructure for smaller firms, and then we put a playbook together, and it talks about all these steps and all sorts of branded images that we can give them that they can customize. And so if it's a smaller firm, we'll come in and we'll build that, and then we'll turn it over to them. Because once you have this marketing infrastructure built, once you know what to do, it's just tactics. And would our team do tactics better than your internal person? Heck yeah. But that's not cost effective for a lot of smaller firms. And we do have firms that have fewer than 10 attorneys that we work with all the time. And these are go-getter firms. But that's not for everyone. So a lot of times we'll come in and say, oh gosh, your website doesn't do these things that we talked about in step 2. You don't have a LinkedIn page. You need some LinkedIn training so everybody knows how to harness their connections. We'll come in and do that. And then, let the firm go off and be successful. And they can be successful without us by using this model.
Guys, you've been listening to Jocelyn Brumbaugh, founder at Builden Partners. Jocelyn, where can people go to learn more about your firm?
They can go to buildenpartners.com.
Awesome. Thanks a whole lot for being on the show.
Thanks, Matthew. Lots of fun.
Thanks for listening to the Esq.Marketing podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.